proud to be here to present today because Roskilde Festival has really been part of my life for a long period of time. It all started just after the accident when I met Henry, and we spent a long time talking. We did a lot of things. We linked together with what was then called, I don't remember what it's called, the IOC European Safety Group. And that was the basis of the Yes Group as it's known today. And I was asked to come in and work with the team, and team is the word for it because that's what Roskilde has always been, a team, and when you work there, you feel like you're part of it. I especially like this photograph because it is for, as you know, a very famous Danish artist, but that's my company, MOM. So I thought that was a really good thing to put up at the start show. Now, it is my second home. I've spent a long time here. I've been here so many times. I don't think I've got these right. I think there's a few more than this, or maybe more or less. I don't know. And some of them have changed. But looking back through the photographs, it's really difficult to gauge when it was that I came here. But what we're going to do today is I'm just going to talk about. This is, as you see, we do a lot of this kind of stuff all over the place, different reports and things. And there's two there from, say, here for Roskilde. One was in the capital, Copenhagen. This is where for more looking at the kind of things they do with the security, crowd management, indoors. And the other was what we're here today to do, and this week. And that's to look again at probably what's happened with the move of the control room, how people feel about it, and then the next phase is what happens in that. Now, these are just some of the reports. You can see over the years how they've changed from kind of ones that were very early on, and then they ramped up into a different phase because it's how things have changed over time. But this is why we came. After the event that happened in Roskilde in 2000, it was a time to reflect, and a time which kind of a watershed in crowd management and safety. Because at that time, there was a difficulty with how do you come back from this? Because Roskilde Festival was the safest festival in Europe at the time, and even the safest festival can have an accident. And so, what must we do to make things work? And what I've got to say about Roskilde is it's the festival that is like a test bed for a lot of things, to make things safer. Year after year after year, there is no stopping. It is about constantly revisiting, constantly reshaping, and then developing health, safety, security, and of course service, which is one of the key things in all of this, because the higher the level of service, the better the security and safety work, because they have something that underpins them both. And this was the first set of pens that were put in 2001. And that was a really big decision to change the way that we looked at crowd safety. But of course, the one place that would do it is Roskilde. The one place that's been the place to come to with some of the most stupid harebrained ideas I've ever had, and turn them into things that work, has been Roskilde. It's helped so many people, so many of my clients, so many people in the industry across the world to see that safety comes first above profit. So we're going to look at 5 areas today. Firstly, we're going to look at 2008, the pressure visits with the suit on the barrier and the radio head test under the stage. We're then going to look at the 2-day test, the new data that changed how we think about the crowd. Thirdly, the 3-day and the change in the face of musical genre. Then fourthly, snippets from other key research carried out on the site. And finally, the control room project, moving something right over the other side of the event, and change is exceptionally uncomfortable, as everyone knows. And so it's coming to terms with those kind of things. So part one. Now, the whole development started with Mojo Barry's and Patrick Mojo Barry's, who unfortunately is no longer with us, who created a set of barriers called the BLMS system for Mojo. And what the BLMS system does is it measures the pressure on the barrier, so we can immediately identify where the difficult points are by somebody under the stage monitoring it on a computer. So as the crowd surges forward, it shows what the peak of pressure is, and it shows the peak or not. And this was the basis for everything that we started to do. So when Patrick Jordan developed this with his team, it created a whole new perspective on how to deliver the management of the crowd. And I don't know whether you noticed in that first picture from 2001, but by having those pens, they are surrounded by people who can then get into that pen to pull people out or to make it safer. But we'll come to why that's the case and why it works and how it works in a minute. So this is what it looks like under the stage. So this is Reading Festival, actually. So I put a little bit of Reading Festival up because it just shows during the day where you've got smaller bands how it builds and builds and builds to the larger bands. Yeah? And here again, it shows that in a larger way as you get towards the end of the gig. And you can see that the pressure there is going above and beyond 4 kilonewtons, which is pretty high pressure. Okay, it's like having 7 or 8 people stood on your chest at one time. But remember, that's only for a second. So we're measuring something that is transient. It happens, and then it goes away. The key to this is 2 things. One is if the pressure is so great as the wave comes in, that then, as we know from Newton's laws, every action has an opposite reaction. As it hits, it comes backwards. As you get the release of pressure, and then another wave comes in, the hole where this happened, where people fall into. And then if it doesn't subside and people don't get up and there's constant moving backwards and forwards, then people fall on top of each other, and that's when on the ground you've got increased pressure, and that causes dual pulmonary pressure. Yeah, so it squeezes the air out. So this is one of the challenges that we were trying to look at. So this is the team. Those are these people. Funny enough, there's Professor Keith Stiller at the back, who's doing some of the stuff with us. There is Jim Gaffney, who probably knows more about barriers than anybody I know. You've got Henrik, myself, and you've got, I can't remember his name, who was the guy who was in charge of it?
Case.
Yeah, yes, that's it, Case. And we work with the university quite a lot as well. So that was the team that worked on this. And so, this is very weird because when you see this, it looks like somebody stuck 2 pieces of plastic together with gaff tape. And actually they have, because that's how we had started. Because we didn't have any money. So when somebody proved something, we couldn't get any money to make it work. So this was the gig. I'll tell you what, I didn't like Radiohead before it was on. It was up at this stage all night, and I thought, oh, what a great band. I hadn't seen much, did I? So this is it, there you are, the gaff tape. So inside here are some pressure sensors from the wheels of BMWs. Yeah? And there are specific points. These guys at the top are some of the guys from Roskilde, and they are putting on heart rate monitors so we can tell if they're okay within the system. And then that's some of the team there. John at the back is an expert in sports medicine stuff, and what he was doing was looking at how people were, if they were all right in there. And at the bottom we had to have 10i for getting the radio waves through and everything, the crowd, so we could measure on the stage. So on the stage, on one side, you had the testing of the barrier, the LMS, so that was showing us what the pressure was. And on the other side, you've got these pressure suits. Okay. Those are the good. And this is the outcome. Now, it was astonishing what came out of this, because this shows, what do you think the first bit showed there? That's when the band come in. What's it showing? What does the band do when people come on? It goes mad, doesn't it? Even with radio there, you go mad. Yeah? So you've got all of that, and then you've got a gap where it's very, very kind of even. Why do you think that is? What do people do in that period? This is what it was showing us. In that period, they start to spread out, find their own space, so that pressure goes down. Yeah? And then that massive spike is my iron run. When they played my iron run, that was the reaction which created the most pressure. But the other thing we found that we had no idea happened, see those negative bits there? When it goes down and it's reducing in pressure, that is caused by this. Because when you put your hand in the air, you take away part of the mass of your body above the audience. So it drops the pressure, and then suddenly it builds back up again as they come out or goes to normal. So we'd never known that that was a thing. So if the crowd have their hands in the air, there are more gaps between them. They are taking up less space. And it's something which is really, really important. So, part 2. Now, we became a bit more professional with part 2, because the thing that it really made us do is think, we can get some money for this. Now, so we applied for funding, and got the funding for it, to build 6 more of these suits. And they actually look a bit nicer. So there were lots of great gigs on that year. Them Cookie Vultures, I think, were great band. Mastodon, which I thought I would have liked, it was fantastic. So, but and now people were in the pit. Okay, now the press were absolutely all over this. We couldn't keep them away because they wanted to know what was going. So these are the pressure suits, but we didn't send them in like that because people would wonder who are these people, these white things. So we put T-shirts on over the top. So they all had pressure suits on, and we had a steward or somebody watching those people, each one on each person, to make sure that nothing happens to them while they're in there. So all of it was going on, and it was mad in some of those gigs. Some were at the front, some were further back. And we found another thing out immediately, that the pressure on the barrier was different from the pressure in the crowd. So that pressure at the front was a combination. The pressure that was coming from people was something that happened at the time that was taking place. You can see this guy here on the kind of second from the right. He won a competition on the radio because they had to have an idea. He got down to the last 3, and his idea was to look at pressure in a crowd. So he came to us, we put a pressure suit on him, and he lost, unfortunately. Didn't win. Somebody else went on a completely different thing, but he had a really good project. This at the bottom here was the BBC did a documentary, part of the documentary on this, and this is the guy in the middle. is the guy who was the TV presenter. And the thing he kept saying is, well, what I'll do is, when you send, so we sent 10 lots of 10 people towards the barrier, they were stood at the barrier, and then that showed on the screen how the pressure worked. But this guy said, well, I'm going to turn around and walk out, and it was about 5 lots in. I said, you won't be able to, you have to come in the way, and I'll be able to do it. We got 3 lots in, he said, I've had enough of this. So he turns to that, and he couldn't get out, of course. So they had to pull him over the barrier, and that kind of taught him that in that situation, you've got 30 people, 50 people, or 30,000 people, you still can't turn around and walk out in that kind of situation. And so this is one of them front, and this is the team ready to go out. We put hats on them with a number on so we could see which of the systems was working. So this is the first thing that we had no idea about. And we had a lot of people talking about women fainting in the crowd. And we said it's about weakness, it's about being drinking too much. And actually, this shows us exactly what it is. Because if you look at this, this isn't the biggest one. I thought I'd put one of these on first. So the temperature, ambient temperature, goes up from 24 degrees to 30 degrees. Right, so that goes up 6 degrees. One of the women, 14 degrees. It went to, we were about to pull her out when the band stopped. Now, the problem with this is, these were very small females, and they were surrounded by huge guys. And what was happening is that the temperature was coming out, the heat was coming out of their heads, but it couldn't go anywhere because it couldn't disperse. It was staying inside that bit where the guys were taller and they were smaller. And so this proved, because people were fainting in the crowd, and you could see the reason why is because it was far too hot. But what happens at the end? The opposite. If you've got no cloud cover, all the heat comes out, and that's a recipe for hypothermia. So if people don't understand that and what's going on, then their temperature can plummet, which then causes them to have that reaction. So that was the first thing we learned. And the second thing we learned was each time there was a push in the crowd, it came in, it peaked, but you can't sustain the push. Because once it hits, it has to go back, because it has to disperse. It usually disperses along the barrier and straight backwards, but sound and heat disperse as well. So working on this with Ross Gilbert was brilliant, because the next thing that I'm going to show you is why we did it. And we had no idea at the time we were developing it, but this is what would happen. Yeah. So it all started with this Veronic, whatever it's called, I can't pronounce it myself, human spatial mapping and pressure to try and understand the crowd. So this was looking at the distance between objects. Brandon knew quite well about this kind of development. To see how close they were together. Yeah, what's the proximity factor? And then that intimate and personal space around the core of the individuals, and kind of modelling the interaction between the objects were there as they move. So you can see this happening by putting this system in. And also, this is where it's about situational elements that are taking place. It's at that point, in that space. That's what's changing it. It's difficult to predict. And it's all related to the context of the artist, the environment they're in, but what is happening in the situation at that time governs it. So we started analysing the density, pressure, excitation of the crowd, and to create different ways of assessing risk, because if you think about it, one of the things that came out of this was those little orange thunderbolt lines. The reason to have those shows the most agitation in a gig that's taking place. Yeah? So that's the kind of thing that takes that forward. And that's what it looks like when you're doing this analysis. And so it focuses on anthropomorphism. how big you are, how far away from people you are, how the genre is changing, and using a representation of that. Because remember, genre is fluid. It is not always the same. Everybody thinks that's a punk band with a big set. It's not. Some genres have different social interactions. A lot of people call them antisocial, but the majority of them are social interaction, as you know from the music industry. And then the one thing we had to do is have 3 pieces of evidence, because you can't validate it unless you triangulate. So having photographs, having representations, graphs, data, and film, all sorts of different things, and then putting those together and saying, yes, this happens, it all works, creates that validation. And those that I've just said is all about how we create risk mitigation models. And that's the kind of thing that people do at their events and venues. They talk about how to mitigate risk. That's what it's all about. Yeah? Because if we didn't do that, what are we doing? And this is another thing. I mean, my PhD was on punk and hardcore and a bit of dance music, and it was about identification of musical genre. Yeah? Absolutely loved it. But this made it even better, because when you follow the Iron Maiden experience along the bottom of the pressure, and then you look at the peaks and troughs, the frequency of the movement and the dancing, then it follows a similar delivery. Not exactly, but it follows a similar delivery. So that was the start of looking at thinking, yeah, what else could we do at Roskilde that would make it safer? But that work has revolutionised how we work with other people. Roskilde, for me, has been the most amazing testbed, because it may not be 1 year afterwards, it may be 6 or 7 years afterwards when you revisit the work and you think, we did that, why haven't we thought about that before? So this here is a brand new venue in the UK, and it's combining genre, psychology, field direction, density and flow to create safe spaces. That's what we're looking at. And Morten knows all about this. Some of this stuff is starting to be inculcated into what's being done. So this is a band called Sweet Token. Everyone knows Sweet Token? Yeah? Interesting band. So this, what's happened here is we've mapped the way people come in through the 2 entrances, because they only use 2 at a time. Where there's one stage right here, but that's not really used. So we mapped how the crowd came in. And then we identified how many people per square metre were in there, what the density was like in different places as we went through. And as you can see, as usual, that 5 to 6 at the front there, where it's reached critical density and people have very little control of their body starts to happen. But we also do penetration tests, and those arrows show the penetration. So there's less penetration on stage right side than there is on stage left. So what that's doing is it's starting to push the crowd across towards stage right. Yeah? So when people come in, because of the way they've come in, then they're more crowded on one side of the stage. So this gives us this. So the green part is the low density, the yellow part is the medium density, and the red part is the high density. Now by having these, your security guys, the crowd management guys, know where to go along that barrier to deal with the crowd where you need it most. So this kind of thing was in its infancy while we were doing this. And that then ends up with a map like this, which shows the time as it fills, and the pictures. So the pictures are all taken 15 minutes apart, and then that was put on, turned, so we had a direct view on the floor, and we could see how many people were on inside. So then, what we do is we go and say to the people in the venue, what you need to do is you have a different way of doing this. It's how you bring them in, etc. So that just shows you how something that happened in Roskilde has helped all over the UK. But I think for me, the most important piece of work that we did was the 3-day test. Now, this wasn't about the suit. This was about the barrier, because they brought it back. They brought it back to Roskilde for 1 year. So we came in, worked with the barrier, and it was amazing what information came out. So here is that team. Again, it's myself and Morton working with the team from Mojo. A different team, but a very, very scientific team, so it was really easy to get the information that I needed, because I'm useless with numbers, so do everything else, but we just don't give numbers. So this was the kind of 10 area setup time. So the front two have less in than the secondary barrier, and then everything else behind the tertiary barrier. Yeah? So in 2009, this is what we've been working with, and every year, myself and Jim Gaffney as well, for some cases, we work with Morton on designing the barrier to make that work. And I can remember coming in and being a big conference on the barrier, and we got everybody who worked at the front of the house to say what they thought were the best things to do with the barrier, and that was really, really good. Because having people on the ground, the operational people's understanding of it, and also the supervisors and the managers, just to say, you know, well, we think this, we think that, let's test it, let's have a look at what we do. So over time, we changed this. And if you see the yellow things there are where the pressure barriers were being tested, because that was where most people go to is trying to get directly in front of the lead singers. So they all push into those guys to do that, which is great. So this happened in 2018, this configuration, which worked really well, but some things weren't right. And the whole thing about it was we started to find that, let me just ask you a question. So if it's 6.4 kilonewtons without any of those barriers, yeah? Putting this into pence, say there's 5,800 in the front 2 pence, 8,500 in the second 2 pence, and 130,000 on the third barrier. So if it's 6.4 kilonewtons on a normal stage there, when there's just one barrier, what do you think from the 5,800 people the pressure was? Anybody tell me? Just have a guess. 6.1? Anybody? Don't be frightened. You won't have said it. Anybody have a guess?
4.
4, yeah. You know the answer to this?
No.
Yeah, it was 4.6. And which you thought was really strange. So then what do you think the pressure was on the secondary barrier?
No.
It's 0.5 kilonewtons. And from 130,000 people, what do you think the pressure was on the tertiary barrier? 0. So, something else has been found. What it was all the people who caused most of the pressure were in the front pit. Why? Why would people queue to see a gig? Because they're passionate fans. Yeah? So all the passionate fans then found themselves in those front 2 pits. So that really drove the pressure in that area. The only time we had a problem was at the secondary barrier, but it was before. It was when it was a big kind of more angular. And Dave Law jumped off the stage and ran down the runway and got up, and people started to try and push the barrier forward so they could see what was happening. It started getting a bit dangerous, so, and then he went back down and it was okay. But it just shows that an artist can then influence how the show works. So we then come on to 2019. Now, was Travis Scott year. Yeah? So this long arm of the barrier was put in there because that was felt what would be the most secure and safe element to put in for the Travis Scott show. It was the first time that we opened and had a long pit area. Yeah? Which is really important because if you remember, this goes back to 2000 where there was one pit area in the front. And psychologically it was a massive hurdle to get over to bring that back, even though at this time very, very few people who were at the concert, well, many of them weren't even alive when the accident happened. So you're looking at kind of people who didn't know about it, apart from what they hear at the festival every year. And that was another thing that we had to look at. I was doing that work. And so we went into, so this is kind of a little film about it. So we're also doing questionnaires with the audience to find out how they felt. Bring me the horizon. The table. So there's the pressures coming up on the computer. So, this is the science bit behind it. The pressure sensors are in different colours along there. You can see where each of them, for the front barrier, the secondary barrier, and the tertiary barrier work. So constantly monitoring that throughout all of the gigs that were going on. But we picked 3. We picked Travis Scott, Bring Me the Horizon, and Move, and just looked at those to see what the differential was in the way that people behaved and what we could find. So this is Bring Me the Horizon. Now, the other 3 of these that I've got from 5 or 6 years before are off the scale. They're up to 6 or 7, but with an album that came out, and also a change in the audience, and also because the people were Danish, more respectful, they had a much less pressured delivery. So as you can see on the top, it shows you that the highest pressures were spikes right in the middle of number 5, and then 3 for the majority. That was what happened. Yeah? Secondary barrier, you can see how it falls there, and the tertiary barrier, it falls even lower. So as it goes back, you can see how that pressure doesn't increase even for one of these shows. But that can change. And then this was more people at this gig than I've ever seen at a stage in Roskilde. Absolutely rammed. And if you see that the pressure there doesn't get really above 1 or 2. It just is fairly static all the way along. It's just people having a great time, great show, lots of room, letting people have a good time. So that really showed the difference between different genres of music and also different attitudes towards the artists. And then That's Travis Scott. Okay? Straight away. Travis Scott there, you can see front of barrier, absolutely mad. Secondary barrier, still going some for a secondary barrier. But the tertiary barrier is exactly the same as the secondary barrier. Now, we've got this wrong element on there. Do you want to talk about this? Morton, do you want to say anything about that bit there? Okay. So you've got a kind of equalisation. There was a lot of people coming out there, coming over the arm at the back. There was more and more people trying to get into the various places because it was a crowd which I myself have never seen before. It was unbelievable. And you walked along the front and Travis Scott would say something and they'd do exactly what he said. So they were kind of being directed by the artist, and not in a good way. So when you come to the end of that, you've got the Travis Scott pressure. Maximum pressure, 4.2 kilonewtons. Okay? Average pressure, 0.299. So right across it, it was only in certain songs and at certain times that this pressure was being exerted.
What's the exposure and time to that pressure?
What, that bit across there?
Yeah. Is it like some continuous pressure from people pushing along to the back, or is it sort of
It's onto the barrier.
alright?
Yeah.
So full continuous.
Yeah, full continuous pressure. Exactly. And then bring the horizon, I mean, look how that changes. Maximum pressure, you'd never think of that, would you? For 1.085. The average, 0.119. And then you go to and you've got less than 0.5 all the way across, because it's a different genre, a different way to manage it. And this kind of shows people how you can manage that. And if you've got this under the stage, then you can identify what's happening. So that, to me, was really important because it just showed so much of what could be done by using technology and other things. And then we move into other things that we did. And there's lots of things. I didn't realise how varied it was till I looked back through some of the reports. And one of them was about checking what we did. So Roskilde in 2006, feedback from the crowd, how they felt with what was happening with the new developments, and things like why they came to the festival at that time. Now here, 74%, so 74%, yes it is, 74% was for a shared experience with others, 71% also put love the community feel of the festival, 70% said to see a particular artist. So it showed that from all the percentages, people chose those three as the main reasons for going. And the majority liked that shared experience, but it's not much differential between us. Yeah? And so we did about 10 different questions, and it gave us a feel of how that was taking shape. I could have put these singly and everybody go, wow, that's a lot of people. When you see it like that, you can see the reasons joined together why people do that kind of thing. So that was interesting. This one, I think, was another favourite of mine. That was the security audit, the crowd management audit. It was after there was a lot of terrorist attacks, and of course, Roskilde straight away put things in place, made sure that the right things, and we did an audit of it, and it made people feel safe. And every time that they do something, it changes the way that people feel. So it's not just about the physical things, it's about the psychological things. Because just having two people with guns that people can see, they feel that somebody's there to protect them. Having the police, having stewards, having support staff, all of those things are so essential. Because in all of the other work that we've done with other people, the thing that comes out again and again and again is the same that comes out here. If you can see people, you feel safe, because they're there to help. And Roskilde has so many people on site here to help, and that means that people feel very safe. And then, kind of, one of the things I really enjoyed doing, because we were able to interview the fans with headcams to get the idea of what they felt about things. And I think this one was really good, because Morgan and I had a long chat, we were talking for a long time about it. And what would make it safe? Instead of everybody running into the pits, and then it all crushing to the front, and if you're about thinking, this is great, I can just stand here, there's nobody around me. What would be better for those people? So we looked at bringing them in 10s and 20s. And we filmed it, watched people come in, and as soon as they came in and they were managed in, they didn't need to run anymore because they think, those who run with me, I just need to go in and stand there. And so they filtered into the spaces that were there. So as it built right to the back of the pen, so people had more space in which to move it. So to me, that very idea of letting that happen works really well. And when we were interviewing some of the people who were in the pit with their headcams, that's the questions like, was it better with the 2-pen system, or do you like it with the 1-pen system? And the majority of people said, we love the 1-pen system, it feels easier, I like the way people always takes up more space, I don't feel crushed. And people treat the audience like they're stupid. But the audience, they're the people that we're here to serve, and they know exactly what they're like. So the thing that you have with talking to people about how they're feeling, all that kind of stuff, is so important, because people come and say, it would be better if you did this. And you think, oh, I'll just ignore that. But sometimes there's some really good ideas. So all of those people that we talked to were very positive about everything. And then it was people said, before we couldn't turn around, we had to turn around. The space there, the space here. And it really made it work. And it's kind of like that orange feeling thing. Everybody has this empathy for each other. They feel that they're part of this huge community. And to me, that's what is Roskilde, and that's why I love coming back. This is another thing. This is a bit of brilliance from Roskilde here. And Morton identified a really good way of trying to get it so people didn't all run in and cause a lot of problems and couldn't wait to get through, they were all barried off. And it's something very similar to what Pascal and I are working on with Wembley Stadium for the Champions League. But only because it happened here first, really. Because 2018, 2019, people falling over, there was people all over the place, running in as fast as they could. The fences came down on one occasion because they were all fenced in. But on this occasion, in 2022, what happened was that there were no fences, and there was a tape, and people could just come and stand there. And the films of this are absolutely brilliant, because see all these people coming, you look at the films from the 2 years before, and it was like, we've got to run in, we've got to be through, this is what it's all about. And then you come this year, the first group come off, then just stand there, they're all standing down this piece of tape. Okay, more people come off. And then it's time to go. First 4 or 5 people run, and then they stop and then look around and think, oh, there's nobody coming, where's the water? And so then it just starts people walking in, starting a change of behaviour. And to me, that was fascinating when that happened. And it proves that if you believe in something, and you think it will work, and you do it in the right way with the right people, then it does work. And that's what Roskilde did. So to me, that proved there was another way to do something. Because if you think about it, we sometimes think, oh, there's only one way to do this. Well, there aren't. There's many ways. It's just we haven't discovered the music. So this is what a bit of the conclusion says in the report. It's the change in the opening strategy to the campsite this year, strong advanced planning, selling of campsite pitches in the areas in advance, and change in the way in which those attending the festival are conducting themselves. Those coming through the process felt safer, better managed, and happier with the whole thing. In the main, the speedy delivery, the lack of slipstreaks and falling, and the more supportive delivery made those entering latch onto that orange feeling from the very start. So it had a reason as well behind it. After COVID-19, it was interesting to come back and talk to people. And it's the first time really I've seen such a relaxed attitude within the festival. They were just loving being back. And that was really interesting. Because what it did is it got people to talk to us a lot about what they were feeling during COVID and how coming to Roskilde, it was their place, it was the place to go. And looking at the way they perceived the festival and the change in artists at the time, because there were a lot of local artists that being put on, and there were a few headlines. For most people, it doesn't matter. The reason being, the younger ones could see these artists, the other ones just wanted to be there. They wanted to be at the campsite, and to be enjoying other things, because there's more to do than just the music at Roskilde. And that really came across, and it showed how the whole community works. And I went to camping places I'd never been to before to talk to people, didn't even know existed, quiet places and all that. I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. So everybody was catered for. And the final discipline is rethinking command and control. And 2023, we started the process, and it was a really great thing to do, because remember, people don't have change. Yeah? And when we spoke to people, it was all about, I would like this, I think it needs this, I think it needs that. And then others who were, I think this is a more comprehensive thing where we should all be doing X, Y, and Z. So we got a lot of different opinions, which was absolutely brilliant. And so we wrote a report outlining the kind of things that could be done and the different areas that people were wanting, all sorts of things there. And so went away, thought next year we happened, so we'll do that. But it didn't happen next year, but it happened this year because there was a resource made available. And this year, just talking to people about what it felt about coming in to the new area of command and control, and the understanding of people that this isn't all, this is the beginning, it's the starting phase. And setting up the command and control processes, if you don't have that, you can't run a festival. But then somebody said to me, well, if you don't have people to build it, and you don't have other things, you haven't got a festival. And I thought, I'm going to answer this actually, so I'll try and kind of put that together. So it's what you do first. And from what the information I'm getting back at the moment, it's been really interesting to see the different attitude towards it because something has happened. And because something has happened, it works. And I'm looking forward to reviewing all the films and looking at what people said and all that kind of thing, to then send a report back so we can see then what people come up with to do in the next phase.